At my husband's family barbecue, his sister looked at me and said, "If you disappeared tomorrow, no one would even notice." Everyone laughed. I raised my hot dog and said, "Challenge accepted." I moved out that night. But let me explain how a successful graphic designer earning $78,000 a year decided to make the entire Caldwell family eat those words, and why Amanda would eventually regret underestimating someone who built her career on strategic thinking and flawless execution. I'm Vanessa, 34, and despite 7 years of marriage to Gregory, I'd always felt like an outsider in his affluent family. What they didn't know was that while they saw me as Gregory's quiet wife who did cute little design projects, I was actually running a thriving freelance business with clients including 2 Fortune 500 companies and 3 major nonprofits. My portfolio was worth $2.3 million in completed projects, and I had $127,000 in personal savings they knew nothing about. The Caldwells were old money with new attitudes. Richard built a successful marketing firm worth approximately $8 million. Patricia managed their social calendar with military precision while serving on 3 charity boards that gave her significant influence in our city's social circles. Amanda followed their father's footsteps as a junior executive, pulling in $95,000 annually, while Michael landed a cushy job at his uncle's investment firm, making $120,000 a year. My background was different. Raised by a single mother who worked 2 jobs, I understood the value of strategic planning and financial independence. What the Caldwells never realized was that my working-class upbringing had taught me skills they'd never developed: how to read people's weaknesses, how to plan for contingencies, and most importantly, how to build something entirely my own without depending on family connections. For 7 years, I'd endured their condescension with strategic grace. Patricia would compliment my crafty design work as if it were a hobby rather than my profession that brought in more annual revenue than Amanda's salary. Richard would explain basic business concepts to me at dinner, despite my having negotiated contracts worth more than his monthly income. Amanda would correct my pronunciation of wine varieties with saccharine smiles, not knowing I'd been working with luxury brands for 3 years. "They mean well," Gregory would say whenever I mentioned these microaggressions. "Amanda's just trying to help you fit in. That's how she shows love." But Amanda's love felt like slow poison, and I'd been documenting every incident in a private journal. Professional habit, I always kept detailed records of client interactions, and I'd started treating my in-laws the same way. At our wedding, Amanda gave a maid of honor speech that included stories about Gregory's ex-girlfriends. When we bought our first home, she questioned if the neighborhood was really the right fit for a Caldwell. When I landed a $50,000 rebranding contract, she wondered if they hired me because of Gregory's family connections. The systematic nature of her behavior became clear when I analyzed my documentation. Over 7 years, Amanda had undermined me professionally 37 times, socially 42 times, and personally countless occasions. But she'd made one critical error. She assumed I was powerless to do anything about it. What Amanda didn't know was that I'd been preparing for independence long before that barbecue. My design business had grown strategically. I maintained separate bank accounts Gregory never accessed. I had professional relationships with lawyers, accountants, and business consultants who knew nothing about my married name. Most importantly, I'd been building a reputation in Seattle's design community through remote work, creating a foundation I could activate whenever needed. The morning of their annual barbecue, I spent 3 hours making my grandmother's strawberry shortcake, knowing it would be the last time I'd contribute to a Caldwell family event. Gregory was busy finalizing details for his upcoming business trip to Tokyo, which would give me a perfect opportunity to execute my exit strategy without interference. "Remember, Dad's unveiling his new imported smoker today," he reminded me as we drove. "Try to act impressed, even if you don't get why it's a big deal." I listened, mentally calculating how much money I'd need for first month's rent, security deposit, and moving expenses in Seattle. My sister Olivia had already found me potential apartments, though she didn't know why I was asking. Strategic contingency planning, always have multiple options before you need them. The Caldwell home buzzed with their usual display of wealth and social connections. Caterers weaved through groups of guests delivering appetizers while Richard held court on the patio, demonstrating his $3,000 imported smoker. Patricia floated between clusters, her laugh orchestrated like expensive crystal chiming. "Vanessa, that dress is so cheerful," Amanda said, air-kissing Gregory before giving me her usual once-over. "The kitchen's getting crowded, but I'm sure you can find somewhere to put your contribution." I watched Amanda sweep Gregory away, linking arms and launching into animated conversation about running into his college roommate. Classic power move: establish hierarchy immediately, isolate the target, control access to allies. I'd seen similar tactics in corporate environments and had learned to recognize them instantly. In the kitchen, Patricia was directing catering staff with precise instructions. "Oh, Vanessa, dear," she said, noticing me in the doorway, "you didn't need to bring anything. We have the patisserie handling desserts." She gestured vaguely toward the pantry. But how thoughtful. Perhaps put it there for now. I placed my shortcake on a shelf already crowded with other contributions from guests deemed not worthy of display. As I exited, I overheard Patricia instructing a server to make room for Amanda's authentic tiramisu at the center of the dessert table. The favoritism was so consistent, it had become predictable. The next 2 hours confirmed everything I'd documented about family dynamics. I'd start conversations only to have people pulled away by Patricia to meet someone important. I offered to help with setup, but was told the caterers had a system. Meanwhile, Michael's wife Charlotte received completely different treatment despite being married into the family for only 2 years. Patricia proudly introduced her as our Charlotte, the pediatric surgeon. Amanda included her in family reminiscences about vacations she couldn't have attended. The contrast wasn't just obvious, it was systematic. I was being deliberately marginalized while Charlotte was integrated, despite her shorter tenure. This wasn't accidental family oversight. It was calculated exclusion designed to maintain hierarchy. When lunch arrived, I ended up seated between Gregory's elderly Uncle Frank and an empty space reserved for Amanda. Gregory sat across from me, already deep in conversation with Richard about Japanese business etiquette for his upcoming trip. Amanda finally arrived, setting down her meticulously arranged plate and instantly commanding attention with an anecdote about spotting a celebrity at her gym. Charlotte asked appropriate questions. Patricia beamed with pride. Even Frank shifted to hear better. During a brief lull, I saw my opportunity. "I just finished a branding project for that new bakery downtown," I offered. "They're having their grand opening next weekend." Amanda's eyes narrowed slightly. "How nice. Is that the place with the tacky neon sign? I drove past it yesterday." "The sign is actually vintage-inspired," I explained. "The owners wanted to honor the building's history as one of the first—" "If you disappeared tomorrow," Amanda interrupted with theatrical timing, "no one would even notice. That's how boring this conversation is." The table erupted in laughter. Patricia tittered behind her napkin. Richard guffawed. Even Gregory chuckled, reaching for his beer. Frank, who likely hadn't heard the comment, joined in automatically. Sound surrounded me like cold water, shocking my system. I felt simultaneously hyper-visible and completely invisible. But instead of the shame Amanda expected, something else crystallized. Perfect clarity about my strategic position. I didn't cry. I didn't storm off. I didn't create a scene that would later be recounted as evidence of emotional instability. Instead, I raised my hot dog in a mock toast, met Amanda's gaze directly, and said clearly, "Challenge accepted." A brief, confused silence fell over the table. Amanda's smile faltered slightly. Gregory looked between us, sensing something had shifted, but unable to identify what. Then Patricia chirped, "Who's ready for Richard to carve the brisket?" And the moment passed. For the remainder of the afternoon, I observed rather than participated, cataloging every slight while finalizing my exit strategy. By the time we gathered our things to leave, my decision was made. The only question remaining was implementation timing. That night, as Gregory slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling, conducting final risk assessment. I thought about the ambitious designer I'd been when we met, how confidently I'd handled clients, how passionate I'd been about work, how deeply I'd connected with friends. Somewhere along the way, I'd started accepting the Caldwell's subtle message that I was lucky to be among them, that my inclusion was conditional upon compliance, that my worth was determined by their assessment. But I'd never actually been dependent on them. I'd built my own income stream, maintained my own professional relationships, developed my own skills. The only thing keeping me in this diminished role was my own acceptance of their narrative. At 2 a.m., I slipped out of bed and opened my laptop. I began methodical preparation. Bank account transfers, apartment listings in Seattle, where Olivia lived, transportation logistics. By dawn, I had a comprehensive plan with multiple contingencies. Gregory left for morning golf with Richard kissing me absently before departing. The moment his car disappeared, I began execution with surprising calmness. First, I called Jessica, my college roommate who'd remained loyal despite my increasing isolation over the years. "I need a massive favor," I said when she answered. "Name it," she replied without hesitation. "I'm leaving Gregory today. Can you come help me pack essentials?" 2 hours later, Jessica arrived with coffee, packing supplies, and fierce determination. We worked efficiently, categorizing what I needed versus what could be replaced. Clothes, personal documents, irreplaceable mementos, and my complete design equipment took priority. "I can store whatever doesn't fit in your car at my place," Jessica offered. While Jessica organized physical items, I handled financial separation with the same precision I used for client contracts. I transferred exactly half our joint savings into my personal account, $31,847, not a penny more. Despite temptation, I paid my portion of monthly bills coming due. I created detailed lists of subscriptions and services needing transfer or cancellation. By mid-afternoon, my car contained the distilled essence of my independent life. Jessica hugged me fiercely before getting into her own vehicle. "Call me when you're settled tonight. And Vanessa, I'm proud of you." Alone in what had been our home for 5 years, I wrote Gregory a letter. I kept it professional, stating I needed time away to reevaluate our marriage. I explained I'd taken only what was indisputably mine and contributed to outstanding bills. I requested space and no contact while I processed my feelings. I did not share my destination. As a final strategic move, I removed my wedding ring and placed it atop the letter on the kitchen counter. Next to it, I left Amanda's cruel joke written verbatim, with date and location noted clinically. Documentation. Always document everything. Before leaving, I allowed myself one moment of reflection. I picked up our wedding photo from the hall table. We'd looked so happy, so full of possibility. Gregory's smile had reached his eyes then. My own face had shown hope and confidence I barely recognized now. "Goodbye," I whispered, replacing the frame and walking out without looking back. Driving away from our suburban neighborhood felt both terrifying and exhilarating. With each mile marker, tightness in my chest loosened incrementally. By the time I crossed the state line, I could breathe fully for the first time in years. I checked into a modest hotel that evening using my separate credit card. The room was simple, but clean, nothing like luxury accommodations the Caldwells considered standard. After confirming safe arrival to both Jessica and Olivia, I turned off my phone. Gregory would be home now, finding empty closets and my letter. The thought brought neither satisfaction nor guilt, only strategic completion. In the quiet anonymity of that hotel room, I fell into the deepest sleep I'd had in months. Morning brought exactly the response I'd predicted when I briefly turned on my phone. Gregory's messages evolved through predictable stages: confusion, irritation, concern, anger. "Where are you? Call me." "This is ridiculous. Come home so we can talk. Your mother is worried. At least let her know you're safe. You're being incredibly selfish right now. I have the Tokyo trip in 3 days. Fine. Take your space. We'll talk when I get back. Not once did he mention Amanda's joke or his laughter. Not once did he acknowledge understanding why I might have left. The omission confirmed my assessment. He'd never actually seen the systematic mistreatment because addressing it would have required confronting his family. I sent a brief text to my mother assuring her of my safety while requesting privacy. Then I turned off my phone again and opened my laptop to search for longer-term accommodations in Seattle. The challenge had been accepted. Now came the harder part. Disappearing not just physically, but untangling myself from the identity I'd constructed as Gregory Caldwell's wife. I was about to discover whether Amanda was right, if my absence would go completely unnoticed, or if I could build a life where my presence mattered on my own terms. Seattle welcomed me with 3 days of continuous rain, as if washing away my old life. Olivia had found me a month-to-month furnished apartment in her neighborhood, a tiny studio with bay windows and creaking floors. After the sprawling suburban house Gregory and I had shared, the compact space should have felt claustrophobic. Instead, it felt like a protective cocoon. The building's nothing fancy, Olivia apologized as she helped me carry in my limited belongings. But the location is great, and the landlord doesn't ask too many questions. It's perfect, I assured her, running my hand along the worn but solid kitchen counter. It's just mine. The first week passed in a blur of practical arrangements, executed with the same systematic approach I used for client onboarding. I opened a new bank account at a local credit union. I established mail forwarding through Jessica rather than leaving a direct trail. I purchased a new phone with Seattle area code. Most importantly, I updated profiles on freelance platforms, carefully curating my portfolio to remove work connected to Gregory's network. Gregory's messages continued, transitioning from anger to bargaining. Whatever's going on, we can work through it. Just come home. I maintained silence not from cruelty but strategic necessity. Every time I considered responding, I remembered laughter around that picnic table, years of subtle diminishment, gradual erosion of my professional identity. Engagement would only provide him ammunition to manipulate me back into their dysfunctional system. Amanda posted a passive-aggressive Instagram story 2 weeks after my departure. Family is everything. You can't choose who stays and who goes. The comments filled with heart emojis from various Caldwell connections, exactly the kind of social manipulation I'd escaped. Patricia called my mother, expressing theatrical concern while fishing for information. Michael's wife, Charlotte, sent a tentative text. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. The outreach felt genuine, but I responded to none of them. Instead, I focused methodically on rebuilding. Jessica shipped the remainder of my belongings in unmarked boxes. I found a therapist specializing in family dynamics and marital trauma, scheduling weekly sessions that left me emotionally drained, but incrementally stronger. What Amanda said at the barbecue, Dr. Lewis commented during our third session, that wasn't the cause of your departure. It was the catalyst. Exactly, I agreed. Tell me about the first straw, she prompted. That question unlocked a flood of memories, subtle digs disguised as helpful advice, achievements minimized, opinions dismissed, all while Gregory stood by, not malicious but complicit in his silence. The pattern became clear when viewed systematically rather than as isolated incidents. By month 2, I'd secured 3 steady design clients through online platforms. The work wasn't particularly creative, mostly formatting ebooks and designing social media templates, but it paid bills while rebuilding professional confidence. Each completed project proved I could succeed independently, without Caldwell connections or approval. One rainy Tuesday, I noticed a striking wall mural in a local coffee shop. The barista saw me admiring it. Beautiful, right? The owner commissioned it from a local artist. She's actually looking for someone to redesign our menu boards and promotional materials. An hour later, I was sitting with Eleanor Marshall, the 50-something owner with silver-streaked hair and straightforward manner I found immediately refreshing. "I don't care about your resume," she said, waving away the portfolio I'd pulled up. "Show me your personal work, the stuff you do because you can't not do it." I hesitated, then navigated to a folder I hadn't opened in years. These were designs I'd created for purely personal expression, experimental, sometimes impractical, but authentically mine. Eleanor studied them silently, occasionally zooming in on details. "You've been hiding," she finally said, looking up with sharp blue eyes. "These are good, really good, but not recent?" "No," I admitted. "I haven't done work like this in years." "Why not?" The simple question struck like a physical blow. I found myself sharing an abbreviated version of my story. Creative passion I'd once had, gradual sublimation of my style to suit Caldwell aesthetic, slow surrender of artistic voice. Eleanor listened without interruption, then nodded once. "You're hired for the menu project, but on one condition." "What's that?" "You do one personal piece, something purely your own every week. Bring it when we meet. I don't care if it's good or finished. I care that you're finding your voice again." Eleanor became more than a client. She became a mentor, pushing me to reclaim creative courage with blunt feedback and unexpected encouragement. Through her network, I connected with other local business owners needing design work. My calendar slowly filled with projects that engaged rather than depleted me. Meanwhile, Gregory's contact attempts became less frequent. Divorce papers I filed through my lawyer were met with a barrage of calls I didn't answer. Eventually, his attorney connected with mine. Proceedings moved forward with clinical efficiency, Gregory's initial resistance giving way to resignation. 4 months into my new life, I allowed myself to check social media. Gregory's profile showed him at a company event, smiling beside a woman I didn't recognize. Richard had posted about the Tokyo expansion, tagging Gregory with proud father emojis. Amanda shared multiple photos from a family dinner, captioned, "Missing no one." The confirmation stung less than expected. Amanda had been right after all. My disappearance had barely caused a ripple in the Caldwell family pond. Somehow, this validation brought not pain, but release. I was no longer defined by their perceptions or limited by their expectations. 6 months to the day after leaving, I received finalized divorce papers. Gregory had signed without contesting the straightforward division of assets. We'd negotiated through lawyers with professional efficiency. No alimony either way. Clean split of joint property. Complete separation going forward. His only personal communication was a brief note. "I still don't understand, but I won't fight you anymore." That evening, I stood before my bathroom mirror and cut my hair, shedding the long style Gregory had always preferred for a modern bob framing my face. The woman staring back seemed both familiar and new, thinner perhaps with faint lines around her eyes, but with clarity of gaze I hadn't seen in years. By month 8, my design business had expanded enough to require workspace outside my apartment. I rented a desk in a cooperative creative studio, surrounded by other independent artists and entrepreneurs. For the first time since college, I had colleagues who valued my input and challenged my ideas as equals. When the first anniversary of my departure approached, I no longer needed to check social media to know what the Caldwells were doing. They had receded from daily thoughts, becoming characters in a story I'd survived rather than active presences in my life. Meanwhile, my new world continued expanding. A branding project for a local artisan food company won regional recognition. My redesign of Eleanor's coffee shop attracted attention from a lifestyle magazine. A comment I made during a design workshop led to an invitation to speak at a creative conference. 1 year after Amanda's fateful joke, I was no longer invisible. I had built a life where my presence was not only noticed, but valued, where my voice was heard rather than interrupted, where my contributions were recognized rather than dismissed. The challenge had been met and exceeded, but the most satisfying part was still to come. The email from Westwood Creative arrived exactly 52 weeks after the barbecue that changed everything. The subject line was professional, seeking designer for national campaign, but the content sent electricity through my system. Your work for Rainier Artisanal Foods caught our attention. We're developing a campaign for Sheffield consumer brands and believe your aesthetic would be perfect for the project. Initial meeting next week if interested. Sheffield Consumer Brands was a subsidiary of Caldwell Marketing Group, Richard's company. The coincidence seemed too precise to be accidental, but my research confirmed the connection was legitimate. Westwood Creative was a respected agency with no direct ties to the Caldwells beyond this client relationship. I called Eleanor, who had become my strategic sounding board. It could be completely legitimate, she reasoned after I explained the connection. Your Rainier campaign was featured in 3 industry publications. But the timing seems suspicious, I countered. The question isn't whether they know who you are, Eleanor said pragmatically. The question is whether the project is worth taking regardless. I requested detailed information from Westwood. The project was substantial. Redesigning packaging for Sheffield's entire organic line with potential long-term contract for ongoing brand management. The budget they proposed was $180,000, double anything I'd handled since establishing my Seattle business. After 3 days of deliberation, I accepted the initial meeting. If this was Caldwell orchestration, I wanted to face it directly rather than wonder. And if it was legitimate, I wouldn't let fear of my past constrain my future. The Westwood creative director, Thomas, showed no indication of knowing about my history with the Caldwells. During our first meeting, we discussed design concepts, timeline expectations, and budget particulars with straightforward professionalism. When I asked about client involvement, he mentioned only that Sheffield executives would review major milestones. I accepted the project, establishing clear boundaries about communication channels and approval processes. For 3 weeks, everything proceeded normally. My preliminary designs received enthusiastic feedback. Timeline remained on track. No Caldwell names appeared on any correspondence. Then came the announcement that would test whether I'd truly become bulletproof or was still vulnerable to their manipulation. Sheffield Consumer Brands would be featured at the annual Marketing Innovation Gala, unveiling their rebranded organic line as part of the presentation. As lead designer, my attendance was highly encouraged. The gala was a major industry event, exactly the type of opportunity my rebuilding career needed. It was also precisely the sort of function the Caldwells never missed. Richard considered these networking evenings essential for maintaining family business prominence. Gregory had always dutifully followed his lead. You have 3 options, my therapist observed during our session that week. Decline to attend and potentially limit your professional growth. Attend and attempt to avoid the Caldwells, which may prove stressful and ultimately futile. Or attend and prepare to engage with them on your terms. What would you do? I asked. Dr. Lewis smiled slightly. I'm more interested in what Vanessa today would do versus Vanessa from a year ago. The question lingered as I left her office. Last year's Vanessa would have either declined entirely or attended as Gregory's apprehensive shadow, dreading Amanda's barbed comments and Patricia's conditional approval. But I wasn't that person anymore. The following morning, I emailed Thomas confirming my attendance. Then I made an appointment with a personal stylist recommended by Olivia and set aside $2,500 from the Sheffield advance payment for an outfit that would serve as both armor and announcement. The evening of the gala arrived with unexpected calmness. I surveyed my reflection in the hotel room mirror. The woman staring back wore a tailored jumpsuit in deep emerald that managed to be both sophisticated and distinctive in a sea of expected black dresses. My bobbed hair was now accented with subtle caramel highlights. Designer shoes, my one significant splurge, added 3 inches of confidence to my height. Most transformative, however, was the expression in my eyes. No anxiety, no apology, just steady readiness for whatever the night might bring. The venue was a restored historic theater downtown, its grand lobby transformed with strategic lighting and minimalist floral arrangements. I checked in at registration, accepting my name badge and signature cocktail from circulating waitstaff. I'd barely taken 2 sips when Thomas appeared at my elbow, introducing me to a cluster of industry executives. Their business cards disappeared into my clutch as we discussed emerging design trends and market demographics. I found myself speaking with easy authority, my opinions met with thoughtful nods rather than polite dismissal. 40 minutes into the event, I was deep in conversation with a magazine editor when I felt a shift in the room's energy. I didn't need to turn to know the Caldwells had arrived. Richard's booming laugh confirmed it moments later. I maintained position, finishing my point about consumer psychology before excusing myself to visit the bar. While waiting for sparkling water, I carefully scanned the room. Richard and Patricia stood near the entrance, holding court among admirers. Amanda wasn't immediately visible. Then I saw Gregory standing slightly apart from his parents, looking thinner than I remembered, and somehow diminished despite perfect tailoring. Our eyes met across the crowded space. His widened in unmistakable shock, lips parting as if to speak despite the distance between us. I held his gaze steadily, neither smiling nor frowning, then deliberately turned my attention to the bartender. The first encounter came minutes later. Richard approached while I examined the event program. "Vanessa," he said, tone conveying neither warmth nor hostility. "Quite a surprise." "Richard," I replied, meeting his gaze directly. "I'm the lead designer for Sheffield's organic rebrand." He blinked, momentarily disconcerted by my calm demeanor. I hadn't made the connection. Their creative is being handled externally through Westwood? "Yes, I'm working with Thomas's team. The preliminary market testing has been quite positive." I spoke as I would to any client executive, professional and assured. Richard seemed to reassess me, noting changes a year had brought. "Your work has evolved since you left." "Not evolved," I corrected with a small smile. "Returned to its authentic direction." Richard shifted uncomfortably. "Patricia is here somewhere. I'm sure she'd want to say hello." "Of course," I replied, neither encouraging nor discouraging the prospect. As Richard moved away, presumably to report his discovery, I joined the Westwood team, seamlessly integrating into their conversation about presentation logistics. From the corner of my eye, I could see ripple effects as Richard spoke to Patricia, whose perfectly maintained composure slipped momentarily as she sought me in the crowd. The Sheffield presentation was scheduled for mid-evening. As the time approached, Thomas guided me toward the staging area. We were nearly there when Amanda stepped directly into our path, her expression a complex mixture of surprise and calculation. "Vanessa, no one mentioned you were involved with this project," she said, tone suggesting this oversight was somehow my fault. "Amanda," I acknowledged. "I'm working with Westwood Creative. Thomas, this is Amanda Caldwell, Richard's daughter." Thomas extended his hand. "Miss Caldwell, pleasure to meet you. Vanessa has been exceptional to work with." "You know her work?" Amanda's smile tightened. "We're family, actually." "Were," I clarified smoothly. "How nice," Thomas replied noncommittally. "Apologies, we need to prepare for the presentation." As we walked away, Thomas glanced at me questioningly but respected my privacy enough not to pry. I appreciated his professionalism more than he could know. The presentation passed in focused intensity. I spoke about design philosophy and consumer connection, demonstrated key elements of the rebranding strategy, and answered questions with composed expertise. The audience response was overwhelmingly positive, with several spontaneous rounds of applause. From my position on stage, I could see the entire Caldwell family seated together near the front. Patricia maintained neutral expression throughout. Richard nodded occasionally at particularly impressive metrics. Amanda whispered something to the woman beside her, face unreadable. Gregory watched me with undisguised intensity, never looking away. After the formal presentation concluded, I was immediately surrounded by attendees with questions and compliments. Business cards were exchanged, potential opportunities mentioned, connections established. This professional validation, earned entirely through my own merit, felt like the sweetest possible vindication. Eventually, the crowd thinned as people moved toward dinner. I was gathering my presentation materials when Gregory finally approached, alone. "You look well," he offered, hands tucked awkwardly in his pockets. "Thank you," I replied simply. "I didn't know you were in Seattle." That was intentional. He nodded, accepting this truth. "Your presentation was impressive. You always were talented." "I always am talented," I corrected gently. Present tense. Gregory looked down, then back up with unexpected directness. "I've thought a lot about what happened, about Amanda's joke and everything before that. I didn't understand at first, but this past year has been clarifying." "I'm glad to hear that," I said, meaning it. "I miss you," he admitted quietly. The words hung between us, once so desperately desired, now arriving too late. I felt no triumph in his regret, no vindictive pleasure in his loneliness, just calm certainty that I'd made the right choice. "I need to join my team for dinner," I said, neither cruel nor encouraging. "Maybe we could get coffee afterward, just to talk?" I considered his request, weighing my own emotional landscape. "I can spare half an hour, professional courtesy." Relief flickered across his face. "Thank you." As I turned to leave, Patricia appeared at Gregory's elbow, social smile firmly in place. "Vanessa, darling, what an absolute delight to see you thriving." Her words were perfect. Her tone betrayed discomfort. "Patricia," I acknowledged, "I hope you're well. We've all missed you at family gatherings. No one makes strawberry shortcake quite like yours." The old Vanessa would have accepted this olive branch, however disingenuous. The new Vanessa held her ground. "That's interesting," I replied pleasantly. "I recall my shortcake being relegated to the pantry while Amanda's tiramisu took center stage at the last gathering I attended." Patricia's smile faltered briefly before recovering. "A simple misunderstanding, I'm sure." "Multiple simple misunderstandings over 7 years," I agreed, maintaining pleasant tone. "How fortunate that I now work in environments where such misunderstandings rarely occur." Before Patricia could respond, the event coordinator announced dinner seating. I excused myself with polite finality, joining the Westwood team at their assigned table across the room from the Caldwells. The remainder of the evening passed without further direct interaction, though I occasionally caught Gregory watching me from afar. As the event concluded, I declined the team's invitation for after-party drinks, preferring the quiet satisfaction of returning to my hotel room alone. In the tranquil privacy of my room, I kicked off designer shoes and stood at the window overlooking the glittering city. The confrontation I'd half dreaded for months had come and gone, leaving me not depleted but strengthened. I had faced the Caldwells not as an apologetic outsider, but as a successful professional in my own right. Amanda's challenge, "If you disappeared tomorrow, no one would even notice," had precipitated not just my physical departure, but complete reinvention. The final irony was that by disappearing from their world, I had become more visible in my own. Amanda had been wrong about everything that mattered. My absence had been noticed by clients who valued my work, colleagues who respected my expertise, friends who appreciated my authentic self, and most importantly, by me. I had discovered that the opposite of disappearing isn't being noticed by people who diminish you. It's becoming so fully present in your own life that external validation becomes unnecessary. The challenge had been accepted, met, and transcended. 6 months later, my design firm employed 4 people and had a waiting list of clients stretching 8 months out. The Sheffield campaign had won 3 industry awards, all bearing my name as lead designer. I'd been invited to speak at conferences across the country, purchased a house with a view of Elliott Bay, and was dating a kind, funny architect who thought my success was something to celebrate, not manage. Gregory had moved to Portland for a fresh start after his company downsized his division. Patricia and Richard quietly removed me from their Christmas card list after their marketing firm lost 2 major clients to competitors. Amanda, I heard through professional networks, was struggling with her own career after several high-profile project failures led to her demotion and eventual resignation. But I wasn't keeping score anymore. I'd built something entirely my own, exactly as Amanda had challenged me to do. The woman who raised a hot dog in Defiant Toast was gone, replaced by someone who no longer needed such gestures. Sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to remain invisible in your own life.